I remember when I first felt the call to ministry in my mid-20s. It was my first real notion of what I was going to do with my life, and it was a very specific and unique call. It was a call to ministry as a second career, which made my biggest challenge then figuring out what my first career was going to be. Because clearly, I felt I was very unqualified to be a minister. I mean, I was just a few years out of college. I had no partner, no kids, no life experiences that felt like they were the right life experiences to help me become the right kind of wise. And I felt like I should probably have this very particular certainty about the exact path to saving the world and healing all of our souls. And I didn't have that certainty. In fact, I felt entirely unequipped to do anything very ministerial besides maybe shaking people's hands after the service. But what I did feel was this undeniable pull. I felt a love of church and its people and the magic that happened when we all got together. And I had this terrifying hunch that on some level, ministry was what I was made for. But it's very uncomfortable to feel unequipped, unprepared, to feel like you don't know what you're doing. I really like the safety and comfort of knowing that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm following the playbook. I'm competent and feeling comfortable in my element. And on one afternoon back in 2014, a very significant afternoon in my life, I can remember that I was feeling none of these things. On this particular afternoon, I found myself lying down on the pavement of I-35, which runs through Minneapolis, Minnesota, laying peacefully and quietly, but not completely peacefully because I could hear some honks from trucks and cars wanting to pass, and they were accompanied by honks from trucks and cars showing solidarity. I was part of a die-in demonstration shutting down the main highway through the city, a direct action created by local Black Lives Matter organizers, something that I had never done anything remotely like before. And this action was in response to the grand jury decision not to indict the officer who murdered Eric Garner, a Black man, by placing a chokehold on him while Garner said 11 times, "I can't breathe," until he was eventually forced to draw his last breath. In subsequent months and years, in response to repeated killings of Black people by police, I found myself donning my clergy collar and joining others in shutting down the Mall of America and the airport, gathering at the 5th Police Precinct and at courthouses, and blocking traffic right in front of a downtown Twins game, always with other colleagues, always with other humans in a big group, guided by the impeccably organized and brilliantly strategic hands of the organizers. What a privilege. What a learning experience. I have no regrets. I have only gratitude at having had the opportunity to join in a movement focused on dismantling white supremacy culture and police brutality. And there is a part of the story that I'm not so proud of, a part of my story. Every time in that moment when the text came that said, "We need clergy to show up this afternoon," or the email popped into my inbox, my first knee-jerk response was to frantically search for some reason not to do it. I would pray that someone, a senior colleague, I don't even know who, some imagined authority figure would walk by my office and say, "Oh, hey, I see that this is inconvenient for you, Elaine. This wasn't on your schedule today, and I see you're being invited to walk into a huge, gaping unknown and make a stand about a very public, racially charged, controversial, heart-crushing situation that is very much in process and unresolved. And you may not realize this, but you're not even qualified to do that. They're not really asking you, so you get a pass." Or maybe this imagined authority figure would say, "Oh, hey, Elaine, maybe you should just wait until all the evidence is in and some of this controversy dies down, and wait until you have total and absolute certainty and reassurance that you're doing exactly the right thing in exactly the right way with exactly the right people. And that comfort level, that will be your cue that it's really time to show up in the public square. And you're not comfortable right now, so you get a pass." But alongside those fantasies was a sense of clarity that I was, in fact, the right person at the right time to show up in these ways. And even though I was feeling frightened and unequipped and awkward, and it was deeply uncomfortable to step into the unknown, I knew where I needed to be. It was the right kind of uncomfortable. And I don't think I'm alone in wrestling with those kinds of invitations from life that are both terrifying and deeply compelling. And maybe you have felt that simultaneous push and pull too. That sense that there's a certain door asking you to walk through it, and yet you have no idea what you're doing or how you will handle things on the other side. Maybe you're wrestling with leaving your job and pursuing a different life that's calling you. Or maybe there's a relationship or an identity that you've outgrown, or it just doesn't fit anymore. It's not working. Maybe there's a crisis or an issue that ignites your passion and even your rage, but there's someone in your life who might disapprove, or it feels too scary to put your neck out there. This is a deeply uncomfortable place. And the truth is that we might very well suffer some losses, or stumble and fall, or feel foolish and lost. And so, really, why even do it? Why say yes to the hard thing? Why say yes to that call that is also a huge inconvenience and might create an awful lot of extra work and feelings and might beget even more terrifying invitations? And honestly, who would really know the difference if you didn't say yes? Back in 900 BCE, in the ancient Near East, a very young King Solomon was sweating as he wrestled with saying yes to a hard thing for which he felt woefully unprepared. He had to deal with the enormous responsibility of becoming the third king of Israel, and things hadn't gone very well for his two predecessors. The reign of the first king, Saul, was kind of generally a mess. And then came Solomon's father, David, who had great promise, but who also painfully missed the mark in lots of ways. And so Solomon found himself in charge of his people, and very understandably, he was terrified. Yet we see wisdom in his response to his fears. The story goes that God appears to Solomon during the night in a dream, and God says, "Ask me for whatever you want me to give you." And Solomon, in desperation, he admits he's very young, he's very experienced, and he has no idea what he's doing. But he doesn't ask to be rescued or to be relieved of his position, but instead, Solomon requests a discerning heart. Or at least that's how it's translated in the version of the Bible that we heard this morning. The Hebrew words that Solomon wished for literally are literally lev shomea. And the literal translation is listening heart. Solomon is confronted with a job description and a calling that would make most people just run crying for the hills, and he asks for a listening heart. In the ancient Hebrew of Solomon's time, different body parts symbolized different feelings. The nose represented anger, so you can kind of picture an angry bull with flaring nostrils. And the right arm represented strength. And the heart was not just associated with love and emotions, but the heart was where the will and intention lived. So Solomon asks for a listening heart. He asks for the home of his will and his intention to be listening, to be open and receptive. But here's the thing about a listening heart. The listening heart is not wired to your personal comfort meter. The listening heart is not tracking your sense of certainty. And it is not necessarily picking up on your personal areas of expertise and proficiency, although it's really nice when there is some overlap there. The listening heart is searching for your call, that place where your personal story connects with the greater arc of love and wholeness. The listening heart is searching for your unique opportunity to amplify love and wholeness from your very specific corner of the very vast and interconnected web of life of which we are all a part, in just those ways that you uniquely and particularly can. This is your call. And as life flows on, our call changes. It takes so many different shapes across so many different chapters of our lives. We might be called to be caregivers, agitators, teachers, listeners, encouragers, creators, organizers. It goes on and on. And whatever our call is in a particular time, to impact the web of life in a particular way, it is to be undertaken with our whole, authentic, and perhaps unprepared self. So this means not forcing ourselves into a mold that someone else has created or performing so it will please others or look like how we think it's supposed to look when we respond to our call. And a very authentic, uninhibited, and wholehearted example of following one's call is Annie Dillard's Weasel, flying across the sky, weirdly and passionately attached to an eagle. She writes, "The thing is to stalk your calling in a certain skilled and supple way, to locate the most tender and live spot and plug into that pulse. This is yielding, not fighting. I think it would be well and proper and obedient and pure to grasp your one necessity and not let it go, to dangle from it limp wherever it takes you. Every day we are offered thousands of opportunities to conform, to consume, to tune out, or to turn away from the eagle that is calling our truest self. And every day we place another tile in the mosaic of our legacy. In fact, there may very well be no better time to say yes to our heart's call than right now. We don't have to be an expert. We don't have to have it all figured out. We don't have to show up everywhere at once and take care of everything. We just have to find that one point to plug into right now and hang on. We just have to find that eagle to our weasel. If we wait to get our lives together first, or if we wait to understand the issues absolutely perfectly, or to spend all of our time rehearsing our own defenses against imagined adversaries and critics, we end up blocking ourselves off. preventing ourselves from yielding to that call that wants to lift us up aloft. And the fact is, the world needs you to be you right now, fully, wherever you are. Just like it needed Zeusia not to be Moses or Joshua, but to be Zeusia, to be himself. Every Sunday we gather here to name that each one of us has a piece of the truth, and that's how we're going to get through this life together. Each one of us has a role to play right here in the very particular node that we occupy in the vast web of life. And it matters. Because when we listen to our hearts and move in response at our particular node in the web, the whole web changes shape. The whole web moves closer to the shape of love and wholeness. And so in the next week, I want to invite you to keep a listening heart. And when you encounter an edge where you feel unequipped and a little frightened, but also alive and curious, just notice and ask yourself, if I responded to this tug, if I plugged in right here to this thing that is calling me, could the world be a little better for it, even if it makes me uncomfortable? Would I be proud to see this gesture as a tile in the mosaic of my legacy? So let's listen together for those uncomfortable callings. Because can you imagine if we all did this? If this became our practice? If everybody did this? If we aligned our living and our choices with the greater arc of love and wholeness, even when it scares us and we feel awkward and unprepared, we might just discover that we are unstoppable. We might just begin to repair a dehumanizing justice system and support the healing of the wound of racism at the core of our country that hurts and diminishes us all. We might just end up teaching our children what freedom, kindness, and generosity look like without even knowing it. And the world might just move towards wholeness a little bit more each time we step into our joy and our power, each time we say yes to our calling. Let us seize what's calling us with that tenacious weasel grasp. May it be so. Amen.